Good evening and welcome to this Cronkite News special. I'm Ty Scholes. Thanks for joining us. Cronkite News is the only Arizona news organization with a fully staffed bureau in Washington, D.C. Our team reports daily in the nation's capital, tracking Arizona's elected officials and working to find stories important to viewers here in the Grand Canyon State. Tonight, a look at some of our top Arizona stories from Washington.
Something else will be in the sky in the coming months: the A10 Warthog, a fighter jet based at the Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson. The Air Force planned to retire the jet, but the Pentagon budget released this week includes funds for continued operation of the A10. Cronkite News reporter Katie Beery and our Washington bureau talked with Arizona leaders about the change.
That change has been a long time coming. For the past 2 years, fans of the A10 have been fighting to keep it in the skies, and this week they celebrated a partial victory in that war.
It's a 29,000-pound weapon of destruction.
Jedi, good hit.
And it's done the dirty work of the Air Force for more than 40 years. This plane might have an unflattering name, but Representative Martha McSally still loves the Warthog.
If you are on the ground under fire, in harm's way, often in very complex circumstances, the A10 provides a capability to keep you alive that no other airplane does.
And the plane will be around for at least another 5 years. After threatening to retire the A-10s, the Pentagon's 2017 budget proposal included funding for the fighter jets until 2022.
The bottom line here is we are not proposing to retire any of these aircraft.
Davis-Monthan Air Force Base has more than 80 A-10s, and that's another reason why Arizona lawmakers, like John McCain, fought to keep the Warthog.
Well, I feel good, not just for Arizona, where obviously it's a very important part of our economy, but far more importantly than that, it is the most important tool in our fight against ISIS and our capabilities of destroying them.
So sure, it's kicking butt in the ISIS fight, which we knew it would.
But McSally has a personal connection. She was the first female A-10 instructor pilot in history.
So this is actually a cutout of a part of an actual 30mm A10 gun.
She flew the 50-foot-long plane for 2.5 decades at Tucson's Air Force Base.
The airplane doesn't care whether you're a boy or a girl. Airplane just cares if you fly it well and you shoot straight.
Fans of the Warthog are already looking to 2022 to see whether its proposed replacement, the F-35, will be ready in time, but that's a fight for another day. In Washington, Katie Beery, Cronkite News.
Arizonans marched in the nation's capital this weekend despite the dangers from Winter Storm Jonas. Cronkite News reporter Samantha Witherwax brings us details from the March for Life.
The near-record blizzard that hit Washington was still only a threat on Friday, but that didn't prevent thousands of people from turning out for the March for Life rally, including a number of Arizonans.
I'm a little bit nervous. Everyone's talking about this blizzard, and I'm from Arizona.
The snow eventually started coming down, but for pro-life activist Susan French, the cause was too important for the weather to matter.
I turned from pro-choice to pro-life way back with my third child, 5 months along. The baby died. I delivered. I saw the baby. I said, this is not a blob of tissue. This is a real baby. And I went literally overnight from pro-choice to pro-life.
Many people believe that today's technology is the reason why the younger generations have been more involved than ever before.
I think there's going to be a tide of change with the young people that are becoming involved.
John Jakubczyk has been coming to the march for 30 years, but he says that he's also seen a wave of a younger generation joining in.
The thing about the pro-life movement is we're getting stronger, we're getting younger, and it's very exciting.
Even students from St. Mary's High School traveled across the country to stand up for what they believed in.
I really believe that this is the pro-life generation, and young people believe in supporting women and supporting life, and it's time to do this. We're ready.
It's important for us to be here because we have to show that we actually care about everyone's life, and that we need to be the voice for everybody.
This year marked the 42nd annual March for Life protest and the 43rd anniversary of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade ruling that recognized a woman's right to an abortion. In Washington, I'm Sammy Witherwax, Cronkite News.
Native Americans from across the country say they went to Washington, D.C. last week to try to avert an environmental disaster. They're calling uranium pollution a threat to their lands. Cronkite News reporter Maricela Ramirez joins us live from our Washington bureau with the latest.
Water problems in Flint, Michigan have been making headlines for weeks now. But some Arizona residents say there's a bigger problem that demands attention.
There's this whole issue with Flint, Michigan, and I'm trying to bring a lot of attention to the community of Sanders and what's going on in Sanders as well.
Although we have worked for decades.
What's happening in Sanders and elsewhere in Indian country is radioactive pollution, causing major health effects.
We breathe in radioactive pollutions every day from coal smoke, from the abandoned uranium mines, plus we drink water that contains uranium.
Charmaine Whiteface of the Sioux Nation and other indigenous people see their effects every day.
My father died from cancer, I've had cancer, my daughter has cancer, and now my son is dying from lupus. And is it because they don't know? Yet they do know. So why isn't something being done about all these abandoned uranium mines?
Protesters brought this question to Washington, where they urged the EPA and Congress to take action.
We have a bill that we're trying to get passed through Congress to clean up the 15,000 plus abandoned uranium mines in the United States.
In the meantime, Tommy Rock is playing it safe.
We keep saying that drink bottled water, buy bottled water, and do not drink the public water.
Rock and others were scheduled to discuss their grievances with the EPA last week. Officials with the agency were not available for comment today. Live in Washington, Maricela Ramirez, Cronkite News.
The Human Rights Campaign has released a ranking of states for how well they protect LGBTQ rights. Arizona is one of the many states that does not do well. We now go live to Cronkite News reporter Wafa Shahid in our Washington, D.C. bureau to learn about these rankings from the HRC.
The report by the Human Rights Campaign looked at state laws that protect or don't protect gay rights at home and in the workplace, coming to the conclusion that there's still a long way to go.
The gay rights movement has come a long way. But the cheers have faded because inequalities are still present.
There is not explicit non-discrimination laws in place at the federal level, and the majority of states don't have those protections at the state level either.
Arizona is part of this majority. It's one of 28 states that is ranked in the lowest category in a Human Rights Campaign report. The report ranked states on how protected their gay residents are from discrimination.
What this report really demonstrates is there's so much more work to be done.
But what does it mean to rank in the lowest category? It means the state lacks basic equality for gay people, like non-discrimination laws.
The state of Arizona should really be focusing on non-discrimination laws and ways that they can put in place that basic level of fairness.
The HRC says these are negative laws in Arizona. Transgender exclusions in Medicaid, laws that restrict inclusion of LGBT topics in schools, and laws permitting discrimination in adoptions and foster placement. The HRC says these are positive laws in Arizona. Joint adoption, cyberbullying protection, and gender marker changes on IDs like birth certificates and driver's licenses. Despite the inequalities present, the HRC is optimistic.
Our approach really has been to take a positive outlook. And what we want Arizona to walk away from on this report is to say they should be making this a priority.
This is the second year the Human Rights Campaign has released a national report tracking laws that affect gay rights. Last year, Arizona ranked in the lowest category as well. Live in Washington, I'm Wafa Shahid, Cronkite News.
For 20 years, the EB5 Visa program has allowed people from other countries to essentially buy an expedited visa. The program has been criticized as unfair, but Cronkite News reporter Katie Beery talked to one Arizona senator who wants to mend it, not end it.
Arizona Senator Jeff Flake has a new bill on the table.
We need direct foreign investment. It helps us. And this is just one program that we have that can aid the economy.
His plan is to reform the EB5 Immigrant Investor Program.
We should mend it and not end it.
Right now, the program allows foreign investors who create a certain number of jobs in the U.S. to get a visa faster than most people. But some say it's hard to track the original source of the money.
organized crime, terrorist groups, and the list goes on and on.
But supporters point to the benefits of it. More than 100,000 jobs have been created since it started in 1993. Flake continued to argue that money from the program helps charter schools in Arizona.
For one, I should say, in Arizona, we're fortunate to have a number of charter schools that have been funded through the EB5 program. But as has been mentioned, there are a number of reforms that need to be made.
In Washington, Katie Beery, Cronkite News.
Copper is one of the main pillars of the Arizona economy, but falling prices in the industry could pose a problem. Reporter Lauren Clark joins us live in Washington for more on the industry's fate.
Well, not only does copper affect Arizona, the impacts of the metal is so wide that it affects us even here on the East Coast.
Potomac Metals transforms scraps into cash. But one mineral they collect isn't turning as much of a profit as it used to.
It was like $3 a pound just a couple of months ago, and now it's in the $2 a pound range.
Copper, one of the 5 C's of the Arizona economy, is taking a hit. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the mining industry employed more than 37,000 in Arizona 10 years ago. That number is now down to 33,000. But what isn't going down is the need for copper. It takes about 18 grams of copper to make this cell phone and about 55 pounds of copper to make these cars behind me. Copper is also
buildings, cars, electronics, medical equipment, aerodynamics. There isn't an industry out there that doesn't use copper.
So why is the value of copper going down? The answer is thousands of miles away.
And the reason copper is down is because China's economy is slowing down.
And that's a problem because the country consumes 45% of the world's copper supply. But long-term, DeLallo says the future of copper could be essential in renewable energy projects.
Solar, and then for like Priuses, there's more copper in hybrid cars than there is in a normal car. I think it's around double the amount of copper. So that's a big, kind of driving force.
In fact, DeLallo says now is the time to invest in mineral companies like Phoenix's Freeport-McMoRan.
Now, I did receive a statement from the vice president of the proposed Rosemont mine, a project that would go 30 miles southeast of Tucson if implemented. He said that he's in no way, shape, or form worried about the state of copper, that the metal industry by its very nature is cyclical, and that this will in no way impact the future slate of this mine's opening. Reporting live from Cronkite News, Lauren Clark, Cronkite News.
Animal rights advocates went to Capitol Hill today to fight for what they think is a better and safer way to train military medics. Cronkite News reporter Lauren Clark joins us now in Washington.
Well, it's a fact not known by too many people. The Department of Defense using and wounding live animals in order to help teach and train its military medics. But all of this may change thanks to a guy named Cesar.
Cesar lies on the table, motionless as medics begin to address his wound. While he may look realistic, Cesar isn't a human at all. He's a simulator that can breathe, bleed, and even scream. Cesar and his companion, the cut suit, are a much better alternative, advocates say, than what's happening now.
Of animals in military training in which they're stabbed, shot, blown up, burned, and killed.
The Best Practices Act bill, sponsored by Arizona Representative Raul Grijalva and others, would fund practices
that better trained troops that are more relevant to human beings, are cheaper, and obviously save animals' lives.
Right now, the Department of Defense wounds live animals in order to teach medics how to operate in trauma situations. But the anatomical differences with a goat or pig could be problematic.
So medical providers who have been trained to stop severe bleeding in live goats unfortunately discover the gross limitations of this training when they're trying to actually translate it in real time to human anatomy for the first time on the battlefield.
But with Cesar, trainees can cut his thick skin, clench his rubbery veins, or stare into his LED eyes. His wiring is specific to a human and reflects a more lifelike experience for a medic. Cesar can even be reused several times, unlike live animals.
There's a more humane way to do training that's going to save taxpayers money, and it's even going to be more effective than harming animals. It should be used.
Companies like CAE Healthcare say they're continuing to improve this technology with simulations that save lives both in and out of the battlefield.
We're here to protect life, not to destroy it.
Now, we have reached out to the Pentagon for a comment, but as of tonight, they have not responded. Reporting live in Washington, Lauren Clark, Cronkite News.
In a wish list hundreds of pages long, President Obama laid out his budget proposals for next year. Cronkite News reporter Lauren Clark, found out how a little-known fund could have a big impact on Arizona's parks.
The Saguaro National Forest, the Agua Fria Monument, and Scottsdale's newly iconic Indian Bend Wash. All three of these Arizona parks have been aided through the little-known Land Water Conservation Fund. The money coming from oil and gas royalties supports the upkeep of both federal and local parks.
The Land and Water Conservation Fund needs to be fully funded at $900 million annually and permanently reauthorized.
And it's a wish that may finally be granted. The president's proposed budget included $900 million for this fund. But to Representative Paul Gosar, who sits on the National Resources Committee, the fund is a good idea gone wrong. He says instead of truly helping communities, it's a way for the feds to gobble up local land and appease special interest groups.
And you know, the federal government owns an awful lot of land, particularly out west, and they don't need to be buying up a lot more.
In fact, 40% of the state is owned by the federal government. And in Prescott, Gosar said that number jumps to 95%. This could be problematic because local cities can have less of a say of what happens to this land or resources. Instead, he says the fund needs to go
back to the states. The states know better. I mean, you know, when people live and they have to take care of it, they're the better stewards.
But Nagel argues the funding is just a small slice and a huge return of benefits.
Because mayors know that parks and outdoor space is critical for the health of their cities.
Reporting in Washington, Lauren Clark, Cronkite News.
Leaders from 9 Hispanic voter groups met in Washington today to discuss how to better engage Latinos in the political process, and Arizona was mentioned more than once. Cronkite News reporter Katie Biere is live in our Washington bureau with how those groups are ramping up efforts to register voters.
The message of the panel was simple. The Latino voice is louder and stronger than ever. Speakers said that harsh immigration policies may actually boost voter turnout, but not surprisingly, one Arizona name was mentioned time and again.
Sheriff Joe Arpaio in Arizona, when he demagogues our community and attacks our community.
That's according to Cristobal Alex, president of the Latino Victory Foundation. Alex says Arpaio's policies might have fueled the Latino voter movement.
A community that was disengaged, registering at low voter participation rates, is now beginning to really build political power, and it's such that Arizona is on the cusp of changing the state forever.
Ensuring that change is why these 9 Latino groups came together.
When the Latino community is outraged, we step up to the cause.
What is happening in Arizona is symptomatic of what's happening in the rest of the country.
Voto Latino President Maria Teresa Kumar was one speaker vowing to unleash the power of the Latino vote.
And Voto Latino created United We Win, and it was because of what was happening in Arizona.
Others agreed, like Ben Monteroso, executive director of Mi Familia Vota.
Those individuals like Mr. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who has been attacking our community in a way that I don't think that is enforcing the law.
His Arizona-based organization is helping engage young voters on a local level.
People to become citizens. So this election will see a lot more Latinos in Arizona participating. I mean, Arizona has about 500,000 Latinos.
And I can tell you there's nothing more in our families than being luchadores.
Arpaio told us this evening that his position on illegal immigration has drawn out many activist groups against him. As for whether or not that will hurt his endorsement of Donald Trump in the upcoming election, Arpaio said we'll know in Nevada. Live in Washington, Katie Beery, Cronkite News.
Arizona is known for its beautiful weather and numerous attractions, but have you ever thought about the threats Arizona may face?
Advocates say there are real risks to international security, some based on our ecosystem. Cronkite News reporter Lauren Clark is in Washington, D.C. with the newly released rankings.
While it may not be quite the time to hunker down in a bunker or pack a go bag, this may cause you a moment of pause.
To our homeland security, our economic infrastructure, the safety and health of the American people.
This she is referring to is climate change, a force that many advocates and experts say underlies the many risks facing cities. The Lloyds of London, in their very first City Risk Index, looked at 301 big cities in the world. They then measured 18 different risk factors and ranked the city's vulnerability. Phoenix is ranking 100th in the world and 16th in the nation. Market crash is the biggest threat for Phoenix, followed by oil price shocks and cybersecurity. For national disasters, we face the possibility of a devastating drought.
But we better get hot on it or it's going to get a lot hotter.
Not only do rising sea levels affect security, said Cheney, they can easily affect markets and financial stability as well. He said a Middle East drought
And decimated the wheat crop. All the wheat, and wheat's the staple for bread that is one of their main staples for food in the Middle East. All those prices went up.
So what can Arizona natives do?
So you've got to insure yourselves, you got to build the better standards, you got to protect yourselves, you got to understand catastrophic weather events. And of course in Arizona, I would think you're going to worry a lot about the heat.
Reporting in Washington, Lauren Clark, Cronkite News.
This evening, Senator John McCain is working the phone banks for his re-election campaign. His target audience, Hispanic voters. Cronkite News reporter Katie Beery tells us how the frontrunners in the upcoming senatorial race are courting the Latino vote.
We are doing outreach, we're doing Hispanic media, we're doing various meetings.
And I'm going to fight to earn their vote every step of the way.
They're the two leading candidates of Arizona's upcoming senatorial race. Congresswoman Ann Kirkpatrick and incumbent John McCain. The votes they're fighting for are from the Hispanic population.
Proven to be a critical factor in the winning equation for the White House and many races across the country.
Here's how the numbers break down. McCain's share of the Hispanic vote lags behind Kirkpatrick. She holds 49% of the Hispanic vote and he has 32%.
They want somebody who's fighting for the dreamers and fighting for comprehensive immigration reform.
Kirkpatrick describes herself as an advocate of the DREAM Act, who wants to keep Arizona families together and maintain border funding. McCain says he wants a more robust immigration system and to prevent terrorist entry. He also worked on legislation to prevent migrant children from crossing the border. Despite the poll numbers, Hispanic advocates say McCain should get some credit for the work he's done.
He did right by the Latino community. He pushed this idea of getting an immigration bill passed that was bipartisan.
But
then he also basically said that he needed to build the darn fence.
Her words were echoed by Ben Monteroso, executive director of Arizona-based nonprofit Mi Familia Vota.
Senator McCain has done a good work. However, I just also think that his political party doesn't allow him to do what the community needs.
But he's optimistic.
Most young Hispanics today are willing to listen to the message of both sides.
In Washington, Katie Beery, Cronkite News.
From the past to the future and how robots may soon imitate humans. At a panel hosted by the Future Tense Initiative, Cronkite News Washington reporter Wafa Shahid sat down with an ASU professor who had his own take on what the future holds.
Robots are really, really cool. I grew up around all kinds of fictional robots, C-3PO and R2-D2 and et cetera. So it's exciting in that sense. It really appeals to the little kid in me.
This enthusiasm drives ASU drama professor Lance Garavi's work in the robotics lab at ASU's School of Earth and Space Exploration. He humanizes and expands robots' mental capacities. But why is his work important?
Studying robots, working with robots, is really as much about humans as it is about anything mechanical. It makes us ask questions like, who are we? What is it that makes us human?
Garavi said he's using his skills in the arts to promote robot autonomy at a discussion panel hosted by the Future Tense Initiative.
There's a sense among humans that goes all the way back to the days of Frankenstein that inevitably there's something fishy about these robots.
Barone and others on the panel said the image of robots in popular culture
from killer bots to docile servants, can be hard to overcome.
I'm here both to caution humans to genuinely be concerned, but additionally, as long as we abide by Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, we should be fine.
For those concerned about the rapid advance of robots, Garavi has some words of comfort. Humans, he said, can still do the robot dance better than a robot can. In Washington, Wafa Shahid, Cronkite News.
That's it for the Cronkite News Washington Bureau special. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.
Hi, I'm Judy Woodruff, co-anchor of the PBS NewsHour. Preparing the next generation of journalists has never been more important than it is now. With its groundbreaking partnership with Arizona PBS, the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at ASU is revolutionizing journalism education to provide students with a real opportunity to work and learn under the supervision of veteran journalists, producers, directors, and editors on newscasts, investigative stories, and documentary productions. The Cronkite School and Arizona PBS, reinventing journalism education in the digital age.
What are you doing? Possibilities. Your day is filled with them.
Reach up, energy in the fingertips, collapse. TV, play Downton Abbey.
And PBS helps everyone discover theirs. Anytime, anywhere.
Up in the sky, you can see it.
PBS, we're with you for life.